I troll mostly.
Yeah.
Like I get on Facebook and people, I'm in all the electrical groups, the electrical fail groups. One great thing that I was able to knock out this year was I did a collaboration with HeatSpring, and they're an online training, kind of virtual training platform. It's really a 3-part. It's the first part, I give you a case study of what happened because everybody wants to, see the gross pictures and find out what happened.
Yeah.
And then the middle part is my favorite part, and that's the why it happened. Honestly, it's complacency, plain and simple. And then the last part are some solutions and catchphrases that I hear in the field, like we've always done it that way, or I've done it a million times. And then some different solutions like, energized electrical, work permits and risk assessment.
Hey, and welcome back to the Electrical Safety Podcast. I'm your host, John Travis, and today I'm speaking, at least for the second time on the show, Jason Brozen. Jason, thanks for coming on the show again.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Anytime we get the word out about safety, it is a win-win.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you do a good job at that. I mean, I was checking on LinkedIn the other day, and you've got to be, as far as arc flash and electrical safety, you have got to be the most followed person I've ever seen. I mean, some of those posts you get, it's out of this world.
It's all thing.
Is there any stories of that, or like how long have you been doing that on LinkedIn?
Seems like I've been really kind of focused on LinkedIn for about, I don't know, maybe 4 years.
Yeah.
Give or take, maybe 5 at the outskirt, but I haven't really I just haven't taken it seriously. I just wanted to just be easy, and I try not to use too many, big words, number one, because I don't know them, and number two, it bores everybody. So I usually try to keep it short and sweet and put some moving pictures on there or whatever, so that, it keeps your attention. And then occasionally I'll have a light bulb moment, something I want to share. Today I posted a few things, and I don't know, it's just been a good outlet for me to kind of just express myself. And for some reason it's taken off. I don't use any other kinds of social media. I'm not on anything else. So it's really my outlet there to get the word out.
Yeah. And I guess the other question, maybe you don't want to give away the secret sauce, but how do you get your hands on so many videos? Or do you people just send them to you, or how do you find all that stuff?
I troll mostly.
Yeah.
Like I get on Facebook and people, I'm in all the electrical groups, the electrical fail groups. And, people send stuff to me, and a lot of it I've either seen or reposted a number of years, but it's getting harder and harder to find content. But the good and bad thing about it is there's always somebody doing something stupid out there electrically. So I don't know that I'm ever going to run out of content.
Yeah.
And so, but it's generally I just find stuff online, and then I'll screen record, post it, add some comments.
Yeah. No, so it definitely takes a lot of work, but it's you're definitely getting the word out for sure. I guess I just want to kind of ask you, like, what you've been up to lately.
Man, it's been busy. I think I had literally started a few days after we had our deal a few days after I'd started work with Tyndale, our last web deal.
Yeah.
And so really it was all new to me what my role there was going to be and what I was going to do. So it's really morphed over the last year. I think the first few months I was, it's just not busy. And now I'm buried.
Yeah.
I've scheduled 91 speaking engagements this year already.
Wow.
So, I'd say probably 60 of those I fly to. Some of them are webinars or, podcast type things like we're doing here.
Yeah.
And one great thing that I was able to knock out this year was I did a collaboration with HeatSpring, and they're an online training, kind of virtual training platform, mostly in the renewable space, solar and wind, battery. And they didn't have anybody to do a 70E training. They had been farming out that training or reselling somebody else's. And so I was able to collaborate with them and do that training. It's a 6.5 hour, virtual training. And that's been a lot of fun because people call me and they want training, but it's too expensive or they can't get all their people together across the country. And so it's a much cheaper alternative. And they can just, use their dial-up internet and get right in there and then watch me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
besides that, it's just been, getting out there, talking to people and shaking hands, doing a lot of trade shows. And, there hasn't been any major breakthroughs, I don't think, in electrical safety. As you know, there's that new OSHA guidance that just came out after decades of nothing new. And so that's been pretty big.
Mm-hmm. So just to touch back on the speaking engagements, you mentioned 91 scheduled, some of them podcasts, so you can kind of see is it a lot of training, or is it also, do you have like maybe a presentation, or not a presentation, but like a, kind of a keynote type speaking deal that you do? Like, is it a bit of a mix, or what do you got going on?
So originally when I joined with Tyndale, we were going to use my talents as a 70E trainer for the majority, right?
Yeah.
And it's turned out that, out of those 91, I've probably done, or I've got maybe 4 or 5 70E trainings scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them are 1-hour keynotes type things.
Yeah.
Right. I've got a 1-hour presentation that I also have a 30 to 45. My 1 hour is typical, and then I've got like an hour and a half, just basically to fill in whatever the client wants. And so there's been, multiple actual keynotes for large groups like American Clean Power, ACP. I had me out. That was a really fun show. And then I might be speaking to groups of electricians of, 20, 30, 40 at their shop. Really, some we charge for, some are clients of Tyndale already, and we can offer that to them because they're, great customers. And so it's kind of a mixed bag, but I haven't done a lot of training. And honestly, it's hard work doing training.
Yeah.
Kudos out there. I did training for several years, but, I think you had Steve Evans on a while back. He's a good friend of mine, and he's still beating the path,
Yeah.
and it's tough, man, talking 4 or 5 hours at a time.
Yeah, it takes a lot of you to get up and I mean, some of the sessions I've seen are 7, 8 hours, right? And you're gassed at the end of that for sure. I'm curious, like, last time you were on the show, you told your story. So we don't need to repeat that. I think we could probably even link to that episode if somebody wanted to go back and
Sure.
hear. But I'm assuming that your keynote would kind of go through some of that stuff.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I do is I don't find it productive to talk about myself for an hour. That doesn't do anybody good. So it's really a 3-part. It's the first part, I give you a case study of what happened, just kind of quickly, because everybody wants to, see the gross pictures and find out what happened.
Yeah.
And then the middle part is my favorite part, and that's the why it happened. And that is the root cause. And really digging into that last couple of years. Honestly, it's complacency, plain and simple. And so I go through that and different parts of that. And then the last part are some solutions and catchphrases that I hear in the field, like we've always done it that way, or I've done it a million times. And then some different solutions like, energized electrical, work permits and risk assessments. I talk a little bit about that. And then I really throughout the thing kind of focus on a few of the miracles that kept me alive. And because there was a lot, whether you believe in miracles or not, I do, and it's my story, so I'm going to tell how I want to. But and then I finish on that. So it's been a really, really, really good outlet for me because number one, I get to hear myself talk, right? And 2, they pay me for it, if you can believe them. And 3, it saves lives, right? So it's a win-win-win. And I could not be any more happy with what I do for a living. It's not a job to me, really. It's a mission, vision, passion, and not many people get to walk that out.
No, I mean, Yeah, sometimes you just wonder. Well, you mentioned why it happened, and I think when you reference that, you're talking more about why the, you know, in that day, why things went wrong, maybe, but also there's that greater purpose. Why, maybe there was some reason that happened for you.
Absolutely.
And but yeah, that's actually been something I've been thinking a lot about lately. Uh, we obviously help people with policy and procedures and things like that. And what I've been trying to do is to really dig into why on everything, on not just the overarching why are we even doing this, but also in the small stuff. So if we're talking about, let's say we're trying to write a policy on step ladders with regards to electrical safety. Well, why are we doing that? Because if one could argue, well, step ladders don't have anything to do with electrical safety, so why are we even talking about it? Right? It's like you got to connect those dots for people. So, you mentioned it's your favorite part, and you mentioned complacency, but maybe we could just talk about that. Now that you've thought about it a bit more, what what are some of the reasons why that incident happened on that day?
So for me, and I think what I see in the field for everyone else, I'm not going to say everyone else because that would be a little presumptuous, but from what I see, and I use this analogy, is that we all have a row of dominoes, right? And every time we make a stupid choice, and I always want to make it clear that it's stupid because it's not ignorant, because the people out there doing the work, the electricians like me, we know the risk, right? We understand the risk. I mean, I think it's hard to deny that any electrician doesn't know that there's shock and arc flash potential in electrical equipment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it a stupid choice. And every time we make a stupid choice, we flip one of those dominoes until we get to the end of the string, and that's your SIF, your serious injury fatality, your accident, whatever you want to call it in your company. And so the question is, what causes us to flip those dominoes? And honestly, I don't think there's any other reason but complacency, because I also use the analogy in my keynote that the normalization of deviation is what causes these things. You do this task like a mouse in the maze. If it figures out how to jump a wall and get that cheese and cut that corner,
Mm-hmm.
it's never going to go in the other direction. You open this breaker panel and you go, man, dang, I know I need PPE because I'm exposing live parts, but my PPE is literally a mile away in a job trailer, on this data center project. I'm just going to get in and out. I'm not even going to stick a screwdriver in a restricted approach boundary. So I'm technically not doing any work. So, and I've done this a million times. I'm just going to get in and out, right? 95% of the time, you're good. You're not, of course it's cooler and more efficient. Nobody knows about it. Nobody got hurt. But now every time you get to that situation, you're going to remember getting the cheese, right? And you're going to do that. But the problem is, as human beings, again, we don't keep jumping off of 25-foot cliffs, do we? We go to 50, 75, or 125, and then we die. So you're going to push that envelope. And basically, you're going to flip those dominoes until you get to the end. And, in my story, that was cutting the tape off the energized bus bar with zero PPE on whatsoever, working alone, working energized. And I had never done something quite that stupid, but I'd done a lot of things leading up to that point, built that complacency in me, right? And so that's the complacency portion. And I could go on and on too. It doesn't just end with the technician, right? It also is the office, the owner of the company who's never had an accident and in his 30-year history, telling him on the phone just to be careful, right? He was just as complacent as I was. It wasn't that he didn't care about me or cared more about the bottom line or getting the job done. But I think as EHS professionals, you're spinning the plates for sledge trips, fall strains, and sprains, and ladder safety because it's the most common, right? And back behind you are the shock and arc flash plates. And you're like, man, we're good. we're fine. We haven't had any major things. You must be doing it right. Right. And so that builds too. So, again, I could go on for an hour about that.
Well, okay. So something you said really quick there that I don't think I've heard that before. And let me see if I got it straight. You said the normalization of deviation. And
Yeah.
so when you're talking about that, you're saying basically making deviations from what you should be doing a normal part of your day. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. It's your new normal. It becomes your new normal. That's basically another analogy is when you start off as an electrician, right? Your blinders are like this and you see everything. You've been taught and you're scared and you're aware and all these things. And as you work and you get older, 10 years in, your blinders are starting to do this. They start to close because all this stuff in your periphery has just worked out for you. Even the stupid choices you've made, or the old guy that taught you as an apprentice has taught you the wrong way and unsafe to do it. And so you're like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all our stuff is just normal. It's just going to happen like you think it is. And that's where you end up getting bit, especially as a more experienced individual. There's going to be more accidents and fatalities because you've dodged so many bullets now, you think you're bulletproof,
What, and when you think about complacency, and you mentioned earlier, it's not like electricians don't know there's arc flash and don't know there's shock hazard and that kind of stuff. But what about the things that they actually don't know? Sometimes
Sure.
there's just stuff that's out of your control, or maybe they've never come across it. Does that fit into the complacency envelope somewhere? And how, I guess, if you're kind of trying to figure this stuff out, how would you explain that?
I'd say, in my opinion, I couldn't give you any list of stats to back this up, but the accidents that I've seen out there are the near misses, close calls, happen because somebody just cut some corners. They knew it. They were cowboys on the job site. They're more experienced. Stuff has just worked out, like I said. But rather than what you just said, but I love your question, right? Fantastic question. And I'll give you a perfect example. So one of the methods that, we outfit 95% of the investor-owned utilities in the country right now. Tyndale does with PPE. One of the things that a lot of utilities use that we talk to is the sticky method, right? The stuff that'll kill you. That's TKY. And I've got some great graphics. And then there's a big energy wheel. And so, we talk about my accident when I'm talking about it. We're just talking about the electrical side of things. There's so many other things in a job site or a construction site or in life that can kill you other than just this electrical portion, right? And even within the electrical portion, there's several.
Mm-hmm.
So what you said is key, right? Awareness training is absolutely 100% key. And a great example is that I was speaking at recently at a UAW conference, their safety conference for GM, this big national conference. And so we're in the opening ceremony. There's 1,000 people in this room, and there's two guys on stage talking about forklift safety. And that was their topic, forklifts and autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. And so they're like, you have to report unsafe, actions and incidents and all that kind of near miss and close call, because we need to track it and train, right? And the most brilliant lady stood up in the back. She's an office lady. And she said, I would love to report those, but how am I going to do that if I don't even know what an unsafe act looks like, right? And so what she said is key, right? Is super important. And so I'm assuming when I make the statement of complacency that they've gone through an apprenticeship, that they've worked under like the definition of qualified is they've shown those skills, physical and mental, and they understand how it's built, how it operates, how it works and installed, and also how to see, risk and how to avoid them, right? All the things in qualified worker. I'm going to assume that, most of the electricians out there with some experience have a foundation of that, right? Not everybody does, to your point, but yes, that is key. Awareness training, that's why we do this, every 3 years, because it changes and we need to keep people up to date on that. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah, I think that's something I was talking with another group the other day, and that's, sort of what I said to them was that usually, it was like a pulp and paper facility, 30 to 40 electrical workers that work there. And, maybe you have a brand new guy, but outside of that, yeah, you know, even if this was a relatively safe group and they had some incidents, the incident is rarely because the guy didn't know what a shock was, or he didn't
Right.
know what an arc flash was, or he didn't know how to use the equipment. That's never true either. He usually knows what he's doing from a technical standpoint. So those are almost never the problems, and then, so complacency is definitely, we talk about culture and we talk about safety culture and that kind of fits in too. I think that if you have a really strong safety culture, then maybe you're going to bring complacency down because you're making that, kind of a more active part of your day or your week or whatever. But yeah, so like if you so you're kind of traveling around, you're seeing lots of different companies and organizations, and what's some of the examples? I think you mentioned early on there's maybe nothing you've seen that new in the electrical safety world, but what do you think people are doing that when you come in and you're like, wow, this is real, these guys got it together. They know what they're doing. What are some of the things that you've kind of seen out there that's been just something different, I guess?
Yeah, I think probably the main thing, and I see both ends of the spectrum, right? There's I always say there's companies from the CEO down that they just don't give a crap about their people and they just want to check boxes of training, and that employee at the lowest technical level could still go home safe by making good decisions, right? So culture is important, but it's not the most important. It always ends with the last line of defense, which is the individual. And then conversely, I've seen company CEO down where there's been deaths on site where it's an incredibly safe culture. And some would say that's what the Darwin Award is for because some people are just not going to listen, right? But I think the most successful companies really project that culture in a way that it's not just here, right, in your head. It's actually here. Like we believe in this and we believe very strongly that this will get you home to your family every night. Like as a safety EHS professional, I don't want to be the one to call your wife and tell her that you died today at work,
Mm-hmm.
right? It hurts my heart to think about that. I care enough about you that I want to prevent that. And these guardrails are the only way I know how to prevent that. And sometimes those are uncomfortable and you want to think outside the box, but we really need you to stay in here, so that we can maintain safety. And so I think getting it out of your head and the people, if they believe that you actually believe it and you're not just trying to bust somebody, but I can tell you a lot of the struggles that I see is let's say you got a big data center job site. You got 1,000 people on this job and it's run by one of the big name, GCs out there that everybody's heard of. And you've got all these PMs and safety people running around the job site that literally have just gotten out of college, right? And these 20 somethings are dressed in their loafers walking around the job site or their new boots or whatever. And I'm not disparaging anybody, right? Everybody's going to do something. But the problem is they come out and they don't really understand what the 40, 50, 60-year-old electrician is doing out there. And they don't speak to him in a way that's respectful or in a way that they understand that, hey, man, I really do want you to retain your sight, right? So can you please put on your safety glasses? You know what I mean? And so some of that stuff comes out a little cocky and it's gonna 180 those people. They're like, yeah, whatever. And yeah, I mean, what they say under their breath. So I don't need to repeat that, but I just think the culture is very important, and that really needs to come from the top. And sometimes it doesn't.
Can't even remember how long ago I saw this video, and it was like it was almost like a Mythbusters of arc flash. And it was a well-known person that did it. I can't find the video anymore, so I wonder if they made him take it down or what happened. But kind of talked a
Cool.
bit in there that, yeah, it was kind of saying like, because every clothing it says it has so many cycles you have to wash it, or something like that, or it's only good for 100 cycles or something like that. So they just
So
like put it to the test and to see how many cycles they could wash it. But yeah, like what's your take
that
on
might have
all
been
that stuff?
Scott. I mean, that might have been my boss, Scott Morgolan. I mean, I don't know if it was him or not, but I think, Derek has done some of that stuff too in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Starring, but uh, yeah. So Scott he's probably the best to address all that. If you can ever get him on the show, I might have to twist his arm, but um, clothing will fail mechanically before it fails. It's not going to fail on you heat wise,
Yeah.
and it'll fail mechanically before it fails that way, right? So if you're starting to see it being threadbare, holes, that's mechanical failure. Then it's time to change it or patch whatever you need to do. But it's meant. I mean, you're not going to wash out, especially the mod acrylics, right? Because it's a modified acrylic fiber.
Right.
You're not washing out a treated. But even the treated stuff, it's created now to last, lifetime of the garment. It's my understanding we guarantee the life of the garment at Tyndale, right? So anything we put out there, we guarantee its use. And so yeah, those videos they show we've got one called Spin Cycle or improper wear, like all the different untucked or unbuttoned or sleeves rolled up, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually go and we blow those clothes up at Kiva Laboratories. And then you see how the effect is. We're wearing a 4 cal PP and an 8 cal arc. And I mean, there's a huge library. So
what that was something actually I had that come up this morning. Company called me. They have they're working on I think it was a transfer switch, and they had a few questions. One of them was about whether or not the exposed or the equipment was technically exposed or not, or was capable of being touched. They were trying to figure that out. They were trying to figure out if certain tasks they were doing was a normal operation or not. And then at the end of it all, the PPE they had, I think, was rated 75 cals, and the arc flash label was 98.
seems pretty stupid to me.
Well, they're just trying. I mean, they're calling ahead.
Yeah.
Right?
At least they were asking, right?
Yeah.
But having a cover open is not normal condition on a transfer switch, especially if you're operating it.
Yeah. So
if you got contacts, you had a plunger pulling contacts open and close, opening the door. That's there's nothing good about that.
Yeah. And but I was curious. So if you had, like, you said you've seen these tests, because I haven't seen the results. Like if you had a 4 cal shirt in an 8 cal arc, what happens? What happens to the clothing?
Well, that's that break open, right? It actually will burn through. There's some fabrics that will get, I mean, maybe you don't have breakthrough, but you got enough heat transfer to go through and give you a 3rd degree through the fabric. Generally, you don't break through though. If you're, you're a 98 calorie arc in a 75 cal suit, you're going to have some break open. You're going to have some burn. And, even at its max, you still could get right up against that 1.2 calorie, 2nd degree burn, which is fully recoverable, but, 1.3 technically isn't, right? So having a suit that is lacking that much. Now, you can layer up, and that's another thing that Tyndale offers is we got a layering tool where we test this, one brand shirt with another brand shirt, which you can't get on individual brands from their website. Don't test together, but, you might be able to wear a 75 cal suit and a 12 cal shirt and still get that 98 because you got that airspace in between, but you'd have to be layered completely, right? Might have a 12 cal coverall underneath your 75 cal suit, which
and you don't, I mean, when you're up against a 98 calorie per centimeter square arc flash, you probably don't want to mess around and rely on the air gap of your shirt to give you that extra.
No,
No.
I wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, to go even further back, that it should be engineered out that it isn't that high, right? I mean, we know that there's
Yeah. I
way
mean, the trick is, and there's a lot of companies out there like this. These guys don't own any of this equipment. So they're
right,
contractors. They're being called job sites. Sometimes it's their own like switch gear and stuff, but they didn't they don't engineer the whole like build. So they're sort of left to whatever whoever the engineer was, which is that's a problem that I still kind of struggle with a little bit. How to help these contractors who
mhm,
have to go into places that maybe they didn't do an arc flash. And then the other thing too, even if they did do the arc flash, how do you know how well they've maintained that system?
mm,
Right.
yeah, that's where
So
that comes in, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But if what's your advice for somebody? Maybe they're a contractor, they've got a little arc flash kit on them, and they're doing work just wherever. I mean, what do you tell them? You mentioned the table method, but even at that, it's like if they're not doing their maintenance, can you really count on the arc flash to even be correct? Or I don't know, have you thought
right.
with that one before?
Yeah, that tables method, it's complicated, right? You got to understand what you're doing. You need to understand wire size, pipe size. You got to understand mainly you got to understand available fault current. Excuse me, at that transformer, and then be able to calculate. You can do that with, FC squared, that Eaton Bussman, phone app. If you know wire size, transformer size, and all that kind of stuff, you can get it from your utility. But you got to have that. It's got to be under 25,000 available fault current amps, or you're done, right? You can't use that, and it's got to trip in 2 cycles or less, or you're done, right? If you can't verify that, you're screwed, right? You can't use either one of them, and then you're going to have to involve an engineer. My big advice, and I can tell you just from reading comments from electricians on these different groups, the mentality out there is just get it done, right? We're just getting, you're a wuss if you don't do it. I'm a big tough electrician. I lived that life too until it about killed me, right? Right. The reality is, you know, if you have a transfer switch that's 98, or 98 calories, you need to understand that you got to have the right PP. I would question that. I'd look at the date on that sticker. I might even call the engineer, about that. But, I've serviced multiple, transfer switches, up to 4,000 amps, where you
Mm-hmm.
rack out the transfer switch mechanism, and those are a lot safer because you can keep it enclosed, right? You're still racking something in and out, and eventually that switch, that 4,000 amp failed, and burn up some contacts doing that. But I've also been in multiple transfer switches where you just open the door and there it is in all its glory, and you got to go in there and try to service that. Um, with the new 70B, last year coming out as a standard, that's really going to affect electricians, Anita techs, and all that. They're going in to do this maintenance, as we'll
Mm-hmm.
call it, and expose parts, you know, and I can give you lots of stories about electricians. I mean, real stories that hospitals said, no, we can't shut that down. You're going to need to bypass that transfer switch while it's energized. You're involving cable swaps, right? And
Yeah.
hot tap cables, and it blows up, right? And it's catastrophic. And so I don't know. After I got blown up, we turned down a lot of work after that. There's just some things that you shouldn't do, right?
Yeah.
And you know, again, then we get into the energized electric work permitting, and is it justified or not justified work? And you can go down a rabbit trail with that pretty hard, but 99.9% of work is not justified energized.
Yeah. I'd agree with that for sure. I mean, I've always thought about, and I don't know the answer to this one, but it's like, until you can get almost every single person in the country on board, if there's somebody who's willing to do it, then to do the work energized, my fear is that that's going to make it so that, probably not the big contractors, the ones that are well established and they've got big and they're not going to, they're not, let's say, they don't really need the work bad, let's say. But some of the smaller ones where that job could make or break their month, they're going to be, well, if we de-energize it and the client's saying, no, you can't, where they're just going to find somebody else. I mean, it's a
100%.
hard one. I don't know what the answer is there.
There's a real stigma if you don't do it, is more, right? You're like, God, come on, man. We're electricians. We know how to do this stuff. Sure you do. You know what insert a bus duct disconnect in a horizontal or vertical bus duct? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right? You can hot swap one of those. Everything tells you not to. And last March, there was a guy that was pulling one of those out, and it blew up, right? And this guy's 83 years old, and he's a master electrician, an electrical engineer, a decades-long business owner. 100% he knew the risk. There's no way he didn't. And it blew up. It ignited his clothing, and they rushed him to the hospital where he died on his 84th birthday. Right? I mean, that's another guy. You can't tell me that guy hadn't said, I've done this a million times.
Yep.
Right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Earlier you mentioned 70B becoming a standard. What does that mean for organizations out there that have, I feel like I could call someone and say, hey, it's a standard now. They say, that's great.
I wish it were that simple, but
yeah,
OSHA, how OSHA is. I mean, you're in the business, so OSHA is, mainly they're going to follow that general duty clause to keep your people safe, and then they get more in the weeds with electrical safety and different stuff like that. But I think it's pretty clear that they rely on the 70E for the standard for electrical safety in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
They use it for their citations and violations. They may not, they say they're not saying we're going to enforce this, but they use it, right?
Right.
And everybody worked that. And they have since about, 83, but the 70B being pretty fresh, is going to require you to have an electrical maintenance program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the 70 has an electrical safety program that we all know you need, right? Some people do it, some people don't do it, but you're required to have that. And that's probably the first thing they're going to ask you when they show up after an electrical injury. We need to see your electrical safety program, because that's going to decide what they do or don't do after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think probably shortly, in the next few years, at some point, they're going to start looking a little closer at the electrical maintenance program. And if you have a piece of gear, say in a steel plant or some production plant, we've probably both seen a lot of that gear that's not in that normal condition, has not been maintained, and it's just flat out nasty, dirty, dented, greasy, mixed match breakers, available fault current not correct with or the ratings on the breakers, and you have an accident with something like that. I think in the near future, Usher probably will say, hey, tell us, convince us that piece of equipment has been maintained, right? And I think that electrical maintenance program is going to be, needed in the future.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day, actually on the podcast, and he was saying that he looked at the correlation even between lack of maintenance and safety. And it's one of the highest correlations you can find in the safety world. So lack of training being right there. I forget which one. That was like 1 and 2. Lack of training, lack of maintenance. So it wasn't, that they didn't have PPE or whatever. It ended up being because the equipment is not maintained. That's actually what caused the incident to happen, and therefore it has a direct correlation to safety. And so now that you have those two kind of standards working together, definitely something, for people to consider.
Right. Yeah, those NFPA documents are fantastic, because you got the 70, it really tells you how to install it. And then the 70, how to be safe around it, working on it. And then the 70B, how to maintain it and keep it in a great working order. And so they really, it's that three-legged stool that people say really complements, each other to keep that worker safe. There also is, I found this one is also helpful as a 79, electrical standard, for industrial machinery. So a lot of it overlaps with the 70B, but that's kind of the fourth one I like to look through and see what applies to their equipment and
Yeah.
so like it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been super helpful. There's a ton of stuff that you just kind of went by, and we're going to make sure that we definitely add some stuff to the show notes, because I think people are going to want to check some of these things out. Just, I think quickly, you mentioned that you're doing a lot of speaking engagements. You got any coming up that, it's at a conference that someone can actually come check it out?
Yeah, I'm going to be at the NFPA in Vegas here in a week. I think I can't remember if it's the 15th through 18th or 15th night to the 19th or something. You can look it up, but yeah, I'm going to be a speaker there. And it's a big year because they're going through the technical on the 70. So it should be a good electrical show there this year. I spoke last year, and it wasn't a big electrical crowd. There was other stuff that they were focusing on. So they thought it'd be a good idea for me to return and come back for this one. So yeah, different shows around the country, and yeah.
No, that's great.
Super worthy.
Well,
It's been on though, man. Because like I said, I'm pretty enthusiastic about electrical safety. I believe in it 100%, and it really does tick me off when I hear about somebody getting hurt out there, hurt or killed, either from shock or arc flash. Let's face it, you're far more likely to die at work from shock than you are arc flash. Arc flash is just way cooler, that's why, I mainly focus on that as a survivor. But I just want people to be safe out there, because I'm tired of hearing about people getting burned up. I mean, I'll give you one example too, real quick. On the complacency side, last August, 68-year-old electrician, William Harger, 38-year electrician, right? 38 years in the field. Works for Eaton, right? We all know Eaton's a great company. Eaton does a great job providing training, awareness, PPE, rules and regs, and equipment, and everything you need to stay safe. And William got into a 4160 cabinet with zero PPE and had an arc flash and died, right? Again, you can't tell me he didn't understand the risk, right?
Yeah.
So my job, at least my drive, is not for the people you talked about that maybe don't have all the awareness training, although I want to be part of that too. But my drive is really to affect the people that have been out there for a little bit and are too hard-headed to really listen to those awareness trainings. And I'm like, look, man, here I am. Not only did I get blown up, but it was 122.08. And so all those, it's only low voltage comments don't apply, right? So that's my main focus generally, to reach out to the masses. And
no, that's awesome. I mean, you definitely got, like we were talking about earlier, you got a reason why, and you got a bunch of people out there that you can help. So hats off to you, and keep doing what you're doing. And like I said, we'll do this again, maybe in another year, see what's going on then. But in the meantime, thanks for coming on the show, and it's always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me, and we'll see you next time.